So as I look back on the story of Jill's house, what I see is a story of man's failure and of God's faithfulness. God is going to be faithful if he's called us to our ministry. He's going to be faithful and he's going to resource it in the way he wants, in the time he wants. We can rest assured of that. So we don't have to worry about that. But God also calls us to be responsible stewards of what he's calling us to do and to work with excellence. And I think that extends to our fundraising task. So if we're honest with ourselves, if I'm honest with myself, I've made a lot of mistakes over the years as I've approached fundraising. I've made a lot of mistakes as the leader of my organization, and I continue to make mistakes. And I think we all need to be honest with ourselves about those shortcomings. We've all made a lot of mistakes, and that's okay. And being honest and open about those with ourselves and with our colleagues, I think, is a really important task. At our leadership team at Jill's house, a couple times a year, we'll do a day offsite to really talk through things more in greater depth than we usually can. And one part of that is always we all go around and share one big mistake we made in the last few months. And I think it's a good practice. It keeps us honest. It keeps us humble. It keeps us from taking ourselves too seriously. It allows us to have a sense of humor about ourselves. So mistakes will be made, and that's okay. There's no problem with that. But what I want to talk about in this session, we've got about half an hour left. I just want to talk about some common mistakes that I've made and that I've seen other people in the fundraising world make. And sometimes we don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be excellent all the time, but avoiding mistakes is sometimes as good as doing the best things. So these are all mistakes I think that we can avoid. This is not an exhaustive list. Again, we went through a list of items yesterday, and again, this list is not everything. So feel free to add to it as you think about it, but I think it gives us a good start. And also, this list is in no particular order of severity of mistake. It's just as I was thinking about it, how I wrote it down. So I want to start with one. And first of all, we'll start with the scripture reference. Who knows what Matthew 6:21 says? Matthew 6:21, where your treasure is, say it with me, there your heart will be also. God tells us that where we put our money, in some way, that changes our hearts as well. That what we invest in changes what our heart loves and what we care about. And one big mistake that I've seen myself make and that I see a lot of people make is they don't give to their own ministry before they ask others to give to their ministry. And I just challenge you, you don't have to admit it right now, but if you're not giving to your own ministry out of your own pocket, I would strongly encourage you to pray about that and consider how you might personally invest in your own ministry. It's easy to think, okay, hey, we're in ministry, we don't make a lot of money, this is what I do, this is my job. But I think it is so important that one of the first things that we do as fundraisers is make our own commitments and give sacrificially and generously. Paul talks in 2 Corinthians about giving cheerfully and generously. We need to model the behavior that we want to see our donors exhibit. And if we're not modeling that behavior, I guarantee it comes through in your fundraising. And I guarantee that donors will know. They won't know, but they'll know. They can smell insincerity a mile away. And if you give first, it'll change the way you feel about your ministry, and it'll change the way that you interact with your donors, and they will see you. You don't have to tell them that you give, but again, I think they'll pick up on it, and they'll see your commitment, and that they will respond to that. So we need to model behavior, and I think a common mistake is to not model the behavior that we're expecting others to exhibit. I'm a firm believer that generosity starts inside an organization, not on the outside. That it is our job collectively, not just you as fundraisers, but for us to be generous in every way with our own organizations, giving our time, giving our talent, giving our treasure to our organizations. I'm sure you all do. And I think that internal momentum can lead to greater external investment. When people internally are not invested, it's very hard to get people externally to invest. Again, I think there's a heart principle there as well that when we give, God tells us it'll change our hearts. And so one mistake, again, that I see is that we ask before we ourselves give. One thing that we do, so we have a fundraising team at Jill's house of about 6.5 people right now. We're going to hire a couple more, Lord willing, in the next couple of years. And one of the big questions that I ask in interviews when we're hiring fundraisers is talk to me about generosity in your life and what that has looked like. James, I think you guys do this really well in your organization, and digging in deep to people's journeys of generosity, I think is what you all call it. But we ask people to tell us about their own journey. And if they don't have a good story for us about how God has worked in their lives to spur on greater generosity, that's a pretty good indicator that they're not going to be able to motivate others to be generous towards God. So I think, first and foremost, fundraising, I think it starts with us. I think it starts with our investment. And that's one mistake that I've seen over and over again. Number two, and we touched on this earlier when you all were talking, taking someone's giving for granted. We think that someone who's been with our organization for a long time, they're just going to write checks again and again because that's what they've always done. Or we think that they have so much money, so of course they can keep giving. That's no problem. As I was creating this list of common mistakes, one thing I did is I reached out to a bunch of donors who I know personally to ask them what mistakes they've seen fundraisers make, to get some direct feedback from them. Here's what some of them said, and these are quotes from several different people. They asked for a gift right away without doing the work necessary to earn my support. So the fundraiser got the meeting and assumed that just because they got the meeting that a check was going to come, so they didn't bother trying to persuade them. They didn't bother trying to ask questions or educate the donor. They just went right into the ask. And that's one thing that we can do when we take someone's giving for granted. We said this already. We didn't follow up thanking people or report on the impact of a previous gift. We just assumed that, when we need a check at the end of the year, as soon as our budgetary year is about to be up, we'll call John and Jane Smith and they'll write their check. Another one, they didn't give me a good reason why I should give a gift other than I had given a gift in the past. That was a big one. If we just assume that their past behavior is an indication of their future behavior, we're probably mistreating our donors, that we need to give them something more than, hey, you supported us last year, don't you want to support us again? So I think taking people's giving for granted is a big mistake that I've seen, and we can get so sure that gifts are going to come. It really changes the way we treat people. One thing that I remind myself to do, because we are so blessed at Jill's House to have donors who have been very generous to us year in and year out for so many years, and I'm so grateful for them and for their generosity. One thing I try to remind myself to do is as I'm setting up meetings with them throughout the years, specifically tell them, I want you to know I don't take your giving for granted. Just saying that explicitly helps me change the way I think about how I need to approach them. And then that leads me to ask for feedback, to ask where they might have been disappointed, to ask what we can do going forward to earn their support again. I think it's important that we think that, that we have the mindset of we need to re-earn everyone's support each and every year. And that will change the way you do your work for the better. Here's another mistake I see as we meet with people, that we only engage one spouse. If it's a married couple, it's very easy sometimes to just engage one spouse or the other. Generally speaking, and I'm generalizing here, don't crucify me on this one, but generally the mistake is just to meet with the husband. More often than not, the husband is seen as the breadwinner or making the financial decisions, and so we meet with the husband, and we don't meet with the wife, or we meet with the wife and not with the husband. But more commonly, it's meeting with the husband and not the wife, and that is a big, big mistake. I want to ask you a few questions, and I think you'll get the answers to them. Statistically speaking, who is more generous with their finances, men or women? Women are more generous. Congratulations, ladies, you got that one. And who, statistically speaking, lives longer, men or women? Women. They outlive us. They're more generous and they live longer. So if you... Exactly. So if you are meeting with, just the husband, and I'll just pick on that example, there are a couple things that you're doing that's damaging the relationship. One, you may be assuming that he's the financial decision maker. Most likely he's not. Most likely he's at least discussing that with his wife. And in a lot of cases, I see that women are the financial decision makers, especially when it comes to giving. Two, you're shortchanging yourself on a relationship with someone who really cares about your ministry and who can add a lot of value and give you a lot of good feedback. Again, whether you're meeting with just the husband or just the wife, if you're not meeting with both of them, you're not getting the full picture and all the feedback that you could be getting. And I brought up, I've had more meetings than I care to say where I have been meeting with just the husband, and I've asked for a gift, and very often the response will be, let me talk with my wife. Very often that is his way of saying no, but he's hiding behind his wife. And so and that can be a damaging thing. So if you have them both in the same room, it prevents that from happening. And I mentioned women living longer, and I mean this very seriously. Women typically outlive men. Ultimately, they're going to be the deciders of what happens with their money when they pass away. And we touched a little bit on estate giving yesterday. In the States, it's a much bigger and bigger part of giving, is people give more and more through their estates. And the women are, again, statistically speaking, going to be the final decision makers on where that money goes. And if you just have a relationship with John and not with Jane, that could really damage your organization and hinder your growth. So I would really encourage you all, as you're meeting with people, as you're communicating with people, don't just send an email to John, send it to John and Jane, and make sure that you're meeting with the couple as a whole. Yeah, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think one of the best ways to get new donors is through your current donors. And one question that if you're not asking it on a regular basis, you should be, is, hey, is there anyone you know who you think might be interested in learning more about this ministry? And then be silent and let them answer. Very often, people will be very generous in making introductions and making referrals. And if they say, oh yeah, we think Mike and Susie would really like to learn more about this, they're our neighbors, or we go to church with them, then it's very easy to say, would you be willing to make an introduction to Mike and Susie? I'd really love to meet them. And that is I don't know that there's a better substitute for finding new people than getting references, referrals from your current people. And I can think of a recent example. One of our board members is in Bible study with a couple, and this other couple has given very modestly a monthly gift to Jill's house for many years. But she talked to them and said, hey, would you like to take a tour of Jill's house? And so this was just last fall, and they said, yes, we'd love to have a tour. We've never seen it. And so they came for a tour and met with them for a couple hours. And then in December, they wrote a check for $5,000, which was the biggest gift that they had ever given. So stayed in touch with this other couple, invited them to an event that we did earlier this spring. They came to that, and then this is just about 2 weeks ago, got an email out of the blue from this gentleman. And he said, hey, Margot and I were talking last night, and we'd like to make a gift to Jill's house in honor of one of the families who we know whose child attends there. Can you call me tomorrow morning? So of course I can call you tomorrow morning. So made time, called him the next morning, and he made a commitment of $100,000. And it's not always going to happen like that. That was a real success story. But had board member Susan not said, hey, Joel, I want you to meet Kent and Margot, I'm not sure that would have happened. So those referrals are really powerful. Let's keep going here. Another common mistake, asking again too soon. Here are some quotes I got from some donors who I talked to. Right after he had made a big gift to an organization, or what he considered a big gift, he got a letter in the mail asking him for another gift to the same organization. He says, I got an appeal in the mail right after I'd given a big gift. And that was a huge turnoff for him. I know it's easy when we do mass communications to not think about exactly who's on the list that we're sending to. But I think we need to put a little more time and effort into that and thinking about, okay, how are people experiencing the communications that are coming from my organization? So I think that's one thing that's really important. One of the top reasons that people stop giving to organizations, do you know what it is? There's a lot of good data about this, at least in the United States. I'm sure it's true other places. Bingo. Yeah, you nailed it. So the biggest reason that people stop giving is they don't understand the impact of their previous gift. So I don't know what happened with the money that I gave. Why should I give again? What difference did my check make? If I wrote a check for 100, 1,000, or 10,000, it doesn't matter. I want to understand, bless you. I want to understand what difference my money made for your organization. Who did it allow you to serve? What did it allow you to do? And that's a huge reason that people stop giving, is because they just don't get it. They don't understand, and so there's no reason to give again. Number 5, poor organizational planning. So I think most of us at some time, if we've been in fundraising long enough, have had a budgetary crisis at our organization. Things have been really tight. Buildings have broken down, whatever, there could be some emergency. I don't know your organization or what that could be. We've had that happen at Jill's house too. Emergencies happen, and donors understand that. And they're sympathetic. It's probably happened in their personal lives. It's probably happened in their businesses where they run into financial emergencies. But consistent emergencies are usually, not always, usually a sign of poor planning and execution on the part of your organization. So if it's every year, oh my gosh, we don't have money again, we need you to fill the budget, we can't keep the lights on, we can't do whatever it is that we need to do. Many donors, especially those at the higher end of the giving spectrum, are going to look at that, and they'll be sympathetic at first, but over time, they'll start to see that as poor organizational management. And again, they understand emergencies, but if it's time and time again over the years, that is going to be a big turnoff. And sometimes fundraisers are in a position to do something about that and change the direction of their organization. Sometimes they're not, and I get that. But as someone who, part of your job is fundraising, and you see these budgetary emergencies again and again in your organization, I implore you, go to your leadership and tell them what that does to the donors that you're trying to get money from. I guarantee it's a big turnoff, and I guarantee you can raise a lot more by talking about future growth than about current emergency or whatever it might be. One line, I'm going to mess it up, but I've heard my dad say it a lot, who's been in fundraising his entire career. A lot of times we like to talk about our needs as organizations, what we need as an organization. And he says we should eliminate the word need from our vocabulary as fundraisers. He says dollars never catch up with needs, but they chase vision. If you have a vision for the future, for what your organization can be, what it can become, who it can serve, and what difference it can make in the world, that's what will inspire bigger dollars. If you lead with, here's what we need as an organization. We need to meet our budget this year. We need to keep the lights on. We need to replace the air conditioner. We need to, give our staff raises X, Y, and Z. That's very focused on the organization, and donors care about your organization, but they care more about the impact that you're having. So cast the vision there, and you need to have good organizational planning to back that up. So thoughtful budgets, clear and compelling plans for growth, demonstrated impact. More often than not, those things are going to lead to more long-term support, more long-term investment than just going every year back to these donors and saying, here's what we need to get through the year. So I know some of you are the heads of your organizations. If you are, that's great, because you're in a position to make the decisions about what the budget looks like, what our plans are. So that's really helpful. If you're not, just again, I would encourage you to talk with your leaders and try to get to a consensus with them on what are our growth goals, what do our budgets look like, and make sure that you have good plans in place. I guarantee that's going to be more attractive to donors than, again, just going with whatever the current need is. I mean, so you saw the building, Jill's house, our campus there. It's a pretty large building. And we're having our air conditioner literally just is breaking down as I speak. And we're going to have to, it's going to be like a $400,000 replacement. So that's a lot of money for an organization like us. But even then, going to donors and saying, hey, can you chip in whatever, 10, 25, 50,000 to replace an air conditioner is not as attractive as going and saying, here's how we're budgeting for the needs of our facility over the next 5 to 10 years. We've made a plan, and we want you to be a part of this. So you can bake those types of organizational needs into longer range plans. But when you lead with, holy cow, the air conditioner just broke and we don't have the money to fix it, that can very often be seen as just poor planning. Number 6, I see this mistake a lot. Fundraisers are sometimes just boring, and we don't have to be. I think we bore our donors to death. I think we go and we talk about maybe it's the day-to-day of the organization, or we bore them with statistics about our organization. Be exciting. You are all part of amazing work that God is doing all over the world, and I'm sure you have amazing stories to tell. Tell those stories. There's a line that I love, which is, numbers tell, but stories sell. Tell exciting stories. Be interesting. Be interested in your donors, and they'll be interested in you. This goes back to what we were talking about yesterday. If you know them as whole people, you can have great conversations with them, and they will look forward to your visits instead of, oh, okay, here he comes again. What's he going to ask for? What's he going to tell me about this time? And he's just going to tell me about how great his organization is and all, whatever it is. So just be exciting. Be in tune with your donors and tell them great stories. You saw a couple Jill's House parents in that film there. I very frequently take Jill's House parents on donor visits with me. So I don't even have to be the one to tell the story. And frankly, I'm not even the best storyteller, but these Jill's House parents can sit in front of our donors and they can have a conversation about the difference that Jill's House has made in their lives. And that's exciting for our donors. They get to meet an actual Jill's House family and hear directly from them about the difference that has been made. I'd encourage you to find similar ways to get your donors excited, get them engaged. I don't expect them to always be so excited to sit down with me for an hour and talk. So find something interesting. Don't be boring. It's easy to be boring, and let your passion show. So my predecessor at Jill's House, he had a line that I love, and he says, stories are the currency of Jill's House. Stories are the currency of Jill's House. And that's just a reminder that I keep close all the time, because it's easy to talk about the details of the organization and the numbers and the budget and all that stuff. But donors care about that, but they don't care as much about hearing the actual stories of your ministry. Number 7, we're going to run out of time here, so I'll go a little bit more quickly. What's another mistake that a lot of fundraisers make? They don't ask. And I talked yesterday about the ready, aim, aim, aim. We need to ask. There are going to be certain exceptions where that's not the right thing to do, certain couples where they don't want to be asked, where they just want to make a decision privately on their own. You need to know couples well enough to know that, but most people want to be asked, and there are so many fundraisers who will do everything but ask. And so one common mistake is just, again, that ready, aim, aim, aim mentality. So you don't be brash, don't be foolhardy, but make sure that you are guiding things towards an ask, and at the appropriate time in the appropriate way, that you're asking permission to make that ask, and then you're following through on that. If you're not doing that, I guarantee you're shortchanging your organization. You're leaving money on the table that's out there for your organization if you're not asking. Number 8, and this came through really clearly as I was talking with donors about this. They feel like your organization is too dependent on them. Strategic donors are definitely animated. They're motivated by what they can do personally, and they care about your organization. They want to make a difference. But it's really demotivating if they know that, oh my gosh, without me, this organization might fail, or there's no one else coming alongside this organization in the same way that I am. So what does that mean for us? That means that we constantly need to be thinking about who else can we engage in this organization? How can we deepen those relationships so that we can see greater investment? That's going to motivate everybody. One of the things that I do when we get a big gift, so I mentioned this $100,000 commitment, which for us is a big gift, that we just got recently. One of the first things I do in situations like that, I'll email a bunch of our other big donors and say, I won't name names or anything like that. I don't divulge any personal information, but just say, hey, just got this big gift out of the blue. And they are really excited to know about that. And that motivates them because they know that other people are following what they've been doing for years and years. So when we depend on just too few people, and we go back to that same couple or those same 2, 3, 4 couples each and every year, and those are the only ones that we go to who make the difference, that should be a red flag for us. It's great to have those dependable couples. You want them there, but we should constantly be thinking about ways to grow that group and adjust our efforts accordingly. If we just assume again that they're going to give and give and give again, There's a phrase that gets thrown around in the States all the time, which is donor fatigue or donor burnout. And I think that's a big part of it is they just feel like you just keep coming back to me and you're not getting anyone else involved. You're just being lazy. And that can really harm our entire organization and what we're trying to do. Number 9, not trying, I think a mistake is just not trying to see things from a donor's perspective. We've talked about that in a number of ways. Not thinking ahead to what does their financial situation currently look like? What might it look like? And I'll give you an example of that. We have a donor who's very generous to us. He's in the mortgage business. So his business makes loans for mostly residential homes. When times are really good in the housing market, he makes a lot of money and he writes really big checks. When times are not good for the housing market, he has no money to give and he's paying money to go to work. So just understanding the ins and outs of your donors' lives and how different things might be impacting them financially, I think is a good way to show that you really care about them, that you understand them. And so, thinking about things from their perspective. So if I know that this donor is in the mortgage business and I know the housing market is in the gutter, I might not go with a big ask. I might go and just ask them, hey, how's business going? It must be hard. So understanding things from their perspective, being empathetic. Along those same lines, thinking about what other organizations might they be talking to. And understanding that they're probably giving generously to a lot of organizations because they're generous people who want to give richly. Understanding what motivates their giving. We talked about this yesterday a little bit, but why they give to your organization. What are they trying to achieve with the wealth that God has given them? Understanding what demotivates them. What are things that are going to cause them to look away from your organization or to give less than they otherwise might. And all these things, to be able to answer those questions, you need to be, again, this goes back to yesterday, spending a lot of time with them, not just once a year, but probably many times a year, over many years, to really get to know them to the point where you can understand things from their perspective. If we just go and we take our perspective of what's happening in our organization and what's hard for us or what's easy for us, what's going well, that's again, we're going to shortchange ourselves, and they're going to view you as a salesman more than as a partner in ministry. And I'll close with this one. Another big mistake I see is that we don't ask people for their opinions. We ask them for their money, but not for their opinions, not for their feedback. A lot of times what we'll do as fundraisers or as organizations, we'll get the donor meeting, which is great. They want to meet with you. And we present them basically a menu and we say, what do you want to order off the menu? Here are the things we're doing. What do you want to pay for? And I think that can be a huge turnoff to a lot of donors. I think they want to be co-creators in our ministries with us. I think they want to have insight into what's going on behind the scenes. So if we're going to continue the cooking analogy, instead of being out in the dining room, invite them into the kitchen. Let them see what ingredients you have, what tools you have to work with, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and allow them to be co-creators. That doesn't mean that you need to turn over your decision rights to them. God hasn't called them to make decisions on behalf of your organization. But can you get a lot of valuable insight from them? Absolutely. One of the donors who I talked with, his line about this was good. He said, if you ask me for a gift right away, I'm probably just going to give you my feedback. But if you ask for my feedback, I'll almost certainly give a gift. If they feel like they're a part of your ministry, not just someone on the outside who's being asked to pay for it, you're going to get greater investment than you otherwise might. And again, there are really wise, wonderful people who are going to be giving to your organization who can help you make better decisions than you otherwise would. So it's not just going to lead to greater investment. It's going to lead to, I think, better decision making as well. So ask for people's opinions.